Welcome back, America. We have a special guest. It's really an honor to have Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the program. Mr. Prime Minister, a lot has been said about what's going on in Israel. Most of it's wrong. You have a Supreme Court in Israel, basically a handful of lawyers who essentially appoint themselves to the court with the help of other lawyers. And since the 1990s, they have effectively empowered themselves to have the final say on really all matters Israel, including changing laws, rewriting laws, taking laws that are passed by the Knesset and rejecting them based on something called the reasonableness standard. Now, in our country, we don't have something called the reasonableness standard because that means these lawyers basically can decide whatever they want. Reasonableness means anything, and it means nothing. And you are trying in a very modest way to get consensus to address this. Can you explain to the American people what you're doing?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, in the last 30 years, Israel has undergone a judicial revolution by the most activist judicial court on the planet. And systematically, the court arrogated to itself the powers of the legislature and the executive. And we're trying to bring it back in line somewhat to what Israel was in its first 5 decades and where most democracies are today. So we want to obviously create a system of checks and balances. The reasonableness clause that we have says that you don't eliminate it altogether, but you say that it's not enough to decide to nullify a government decision or a law based on something, subjective, like an argument, I think this is unreasonable. And so there are limitations on this. Well, this is what you have in all democracies. And this is presented by our opponents as being this awful end to democracy. If that's the case, you have no democracies anywhere else on earth. And of course, you have to remember that the court has a lot of other checks. I mean, they can disqualify appointments by saying there's conflict of interest or undue process, you name it. But you do say that you cannot disqualify things simply because you find it unreasonable. And I think that's long overdue. This comes after we put forward a much more encompassing reform, and we sort of trimmed it down in order to try to reach consensus. I gave 3 months of negotiations, got nowhere with the opposition that is held hostage by an extreme minority that organizes all these protests and demonstrations. And so I decided to pass the reasonableness clause. But right now, having done that, I'm still trying to get a consensus for the amendment because I think it's better for a democracy that judicial changes are done with as broad a consensus as you can. That's basically where we are objectively. It's not what you read. It's not what you hear. It's not what the news media are covering. They're just wrong.
Now, Mr. Prime Minister, your opposition parties have really organized most of these protests, and they haven't been secret about it, although the media seems to ignore it. We're talking about opposition to you, to your majority, your coalition. They have not accepted the results of the election. And as I see it, they're trying to overthrow your government. They're trying to get your government to back off. By the way, that's how Ehud Barak sees it, a former prime minister who's helped organize this effort, and many, many others. You have all kinds of dark money seeping into your country, even from outside your country. You have all kinds of mouthpiece surrogates in the media like Thomas Friedman and others who are trying to undermine your government and have never supported your government. Isn't this really a way to try and destroy the coalition that you've put together with the overwhelming support of the Israeli people?
Well, you know, the organizers of the demonstrations say so openly. In fact, they began their efforts well before we established the government or put forward the judicial reform. They just say, listen, we have to bring down, this is a center-right government, and they want a left government. They don't want us in power. They want to be in power, except they can't get it through elections. So they're trying to do it through these massive disruptions, blocking roads, setting up fires, blocking the airport, things of that sort. Which and the other thing they're trying to do is basically, I would say, assemble a cast of former generals who tell you that, or basically telling the government, If you don't do what we say, if you go ahead with legislation, then we're going to incite for mass disobedience in the army. I'll tell you, the day that Israel's elected government succumbs to threats by former generals, that's the end of democracy, and we're not going to let that happen. That's where we are today, and we're not letting it happen.
In America, we have a word for that. It's called treason.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.